The galaxy had many names for Earth. The Velari called it the Death Cradle. The Keldris species named it the Poison World. But the official term in all galactic records was simple: Class 7 Deathworld. It was the kind of planet that made other species shiver. The gravity was crushing. The sun sent invisible rays that could burn flesh and twist the very code of life. The weather changed without warning, bringing floods, storms, and winds that could tear buildings apart. And everywhere, on land and in water, predators waited with sharp teeth and endless hunger. No civilized species would ever choose to live on such a world. The Galactic Assembly had studied Earth from a distance for thousands of years and concluded that nothing intelligent could survive there. They were wrong. Humans not only survived, they thrived. They built cities and sailed oceans. They climbed mountains and explored the deepest caves. And 30 years ago, they looked up at the stars and found a way to reach them. The galaxy was not ready. Commander Park Do-yeon stood on the bridge of his ship, the Hanwell, and watched the stars drift past on the main screen. The Hanwell was a patrol vessel, not very large but fast and tough. It had been built by human hands, designed to handle the dangers that humans knew so well. Do-yeon was 43 years old with gray appearing in his short black hair. His face was calm, but his eyes were always watching, always thinking. He had served in the United Earth Fleet for 20 years, and he had seen many strange things in the darkness between stars. Today was supposed to be a quiet day. The Hanwell was patrolling the neutral shipping lanes, making sure cargo ships could travel safely. It was boring work, but important work. Then the signal came. The communications officer, a young woman named Yuna, sat up straight in her chair. Her fingers moved quickly across her console. "Commander, we are receiving a transmission. It is an SOS signal." Do-yeon turned to face her. "Source?" "The Keldris Nebula, sir. The signal is weak, but I am cleaning it up now." The bridge went quiet. Every crew member knew what the Keldris Nebula meant. It was deep inside Velari space, the territory of a species that had made their feelings about humans very clear. Humans were not welcome. Humans were dangerous. Humans should stay away. Yuna worked on the signal for another minute. Then she played it through the bridge speakers. The voice was not human. It was high and musical, the way Velari voices always sounded. But there was no beauty in this voice, only fear. "This is the transport vessel Gentle Dawn. We are under attack. Marrowclaw raiders have disabled our engines. We have 400 passengers, including 112 children. Our shields are failing. Our life support is damaged. Please, anyone who can hear this, we need help. We have maybe 6 hours before the air runs out. Please, someone help us." The message repeated and repeated again. Do-yeon stood very still. Around him, his crew waited. He could feel their eyes on him, waiting to see what he would do. 6 hours, 400 people, children. "Yuna," he said quietly, "how far is the Keldris Nebula from our position?" 4 hours at maximum speed, sir." "And how far is the nearest Velari patrol fleet?" Yuna checked her data. Her face became pale. 3 days, Commander." 3 days. The refugees would be dead in 6 hours. The Velari could not save them. No one could save them. Except the Hanwell. Do-yeon closed his eyes for a moment. He thought about the rules. He thought about the treaties. He thought about all the careful work humanity had done to prove they were not the monsters everyone believed them to be. Then he thought about 112 children running out of air. "Set course for the Keldris Nebula," he said. "Maximum speed." Yuna hesitated. "Commander, if we enter Velari space without permission, it could be considered an act of war. Earth Command will need to approve this action. Then send them a message explaining what we are doing. But do not wait for a reply. Those people do not have time for politics." He looked around the bridge at his crew. They were all young, most of them on their first deep space assignment. They had families back home. They had futures ahead of them, and he was about to risk all of it. "I will not force anyone to come with me," Do-yun said. "If any of you want to stay behind, I will understand. This is not what we signed up for." No one moved. Engineer Woojin, the youngest member of the crew at just 22 years old, spoke up from his station. "Commander, my grandmother used to say that when someone calls for help, you answer." She did not say anything about checking their address first. A small smile crossed Do-yun's face. "Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman." "She survived the Seoul floods, sir. Strangers carried her to safety when she was just a girl. She never forgot that." Do-yun nodded. "Then let us make sure some other grandmother can tell the same story." He turned back to the main screen. "Send a message on all human frequencies. Tell every ship in range what is happening. Tell them we are going to help, and anyone who wants to join us is welcome." Yuna sent the message. Then they waited. The first response came in 3 minutes. It was from a cargo ship called the Morning Light, captained by a man named Kang Ji-hwan. His voice was cheerful, almost excited. "Commander Do-yun, this is the Morning Light. We are carrying machine parts to the outer colonies, but I think they can wait. We are changing course now." More responses followed. A medical frigate called Mercy's Hand, with a full staff of doctors and nurses. A mining vessel with thick armor and powerful engines. A survey ship that happened to be studying a nearby asteroid field. And then, to everyone's surprise, a luxury cruise liner called the Busan Star. Captain Ji-hwan's voice came through again, laughing. "Commander, you are not going to believe this. The Busan Star is joining us. That is a cruise ship with tourists." Do-yun shook his head in amazement. "Are they sure? This could be dangerous." A new voice joined the channel. It was the captain of the Busan Star, a woman with a thick accent and no patience for doubt. "My passengers paid for adventure tourism, Commander. I think we can deliver." Within an hour, 17 ships had answered the call. Military vessels and civilian ships, traders and explorers, all of them human, all of them heading for Velari space. The Deathworlders Armada was forming. Somewhere far away, in the golden halls of the Velari High Council, alarm bells were ringing. Sensors had detected the human fleet changing course, heading straight for their territory. Ambassador Torin, the Velari representative to Earth, sent an urgent message demanding to know what was happening. Director Han Minji, Earth's diplomatic leader, sent back a simple reply. "Our people are responding to a distress call. Article 7 of the Galactic Compact allows any vessel to answer an SOS regardless of territorial boundaries." Torin was furious. He called for emergency meetings. He threatened consequences. He reminded everyone that humans were Deathworlders, monsters from a savage planet who could not be trusted. But the human ships did not slow down. On the Hanul, Commander Do-yun read the angry messages from the Velari and set them aside. He had more important things to worry about. Somewhere in the Keldris Nebula, 400 people were counting the minutes until their air ran out. Among them were children who had done nothing wrong except be born in the wrong place at the wrong time. Politics could wait. Rules could wait. Everything could wait except the simple truth that Do-yun had learned as a child on Earth. When someone needs help, you help them. You do not ask permission. You do not calculate the cost. You just go. The Hanul jumped to faster-than-light speed, and the stars became streaks of light against the darkness. The Deathworlders were coming. The news spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. On 1,000 different worlds, beings of every shape and size watched their screens in confusion and fear. The Deathworlders were mobilizing. 17 human ships were racing toward Velari space, and no one knew why. The Velari were the oldest species in that sector of space. They were tall and thin, with skin that shimmered like pearl and eyes that glowed soft blue. They considered themselves civilized, peaceful, and wise. They had looked at humans and seen only danger. Now those dangerous creatures were heading straight for their territory. In the golden council chambers of the Velari homeworld, Ambassador Torin stood before the High Council and tried to explain what was happening. His voice was sharp with anger. "The humans claim they are responding to a distress signal," he said. "They say a transport ship has been attacked by Marrowclaw raiders. They say there are refugees who need rescue." Elder Voss, the oldest member of the council, leaned forward in his floating chair. His face was lined with centuries of life. "Is this true? Has a ship been attacked?" "We have received similar reports," Torin admitted. "The transport vessel Gentle Dawn went silent several hours ago. Our patrol fleet is 3 days away." "Then why are you angry?" another council member asked. "If the humans want to rescue our people, should we not welcome this?" Torin's eyes flashed. "Because they did not ask permission. They are entering our space without authorization. This is a violation of our sovereignty, and besides," he paused, his voice dropping low, "we all know what humans really are. They are Deathworlders, predators. They did not evolve kindness on that savage planet of theirs. They must have some other reason for this mission." The council fell silent. Fear hung in the air like smoke. Meanwhile, aboard the human ships, very different conversations were taking place. On the medical frigate Mercy's Hand, Dr. Lihana was preparing for the worst. She was 40 years old, with steady hands and a mind full of knowledge about species from across the galaxy. For 15 years she had studied alien biology, learning how their bodies worked, what they needed to survive, what could kill them. Now all that knowledge would be put to the test. "We have no idea what species are on that transport," she told her medical team. "Velari, probably, but the distress call mentioned multiple species. We need to be ready for anything." A young nurse named Subin looked worried. "Doctor, some of these species have very different needs. The temperature that keeps a Velari comfortable would give a Keldris frostbite. The air pressure that one species needs might crush another." Hana nodded. "I know. That is why we are dividing the ship into zones. Each zone will have different environmental settings. We will triage patients based on their biology first, injuries second." It was a massive challenge. Human medicine had evolved to treat one species. Now they had to treat half a dozen, all at the same time, with limited supplies and limited time. But that was what humans did. They faced impossible problems and found solutions anyway. On the cruise liner Busan Star, Captain Kang Jiwon was having a very different conversation with his passengers. The Busan Star was a beautiful ship, designed for luxury travel through scenic regions of space. Its passengers were wealthy tourists who had paid good money for comfortable cabins, fine food, and spectacular views. Now Jiwon was asking them to fly into a war zone. "I want to be honest with you," he said, standing in the Grand Observation Lounge. 300 passengers watched him with wide eyes. "We are heading toward danger. There may be fighting. This ship is not a military vessel. Our shields are meant for space debris, not weapons fire." He paused, letting that sink in. "But there are 400 people who need help. Many of them are children. The Velari cannot reach them in time. We can. So I have made the decision to join the rescue mission." A man in expensive clothes stood up. "This is outrageous. I paid for a vacation, not a battle. Turn this ship around immediately." Jiwon looked at him calmly. "Sir, you are welcome to stay in your cabin, but I am not turning around. Anyone who wants to help, we need volunteers. Anyone who wants to stay safe, the inner compartments are reinforced." For a moment, no one moved. Then a woman stood up. She was old, with white hair and wrinkled hands. "Captain, I am a retired teacher. I have no medical training and I cannot fight, but I can hold a frightened child's hand. I can tell stories to keep them calm. Tell me where to go." More people stood, then more. Within minutes, over half the passengers had volunteered for something. Some had useful skills, like a retired engineer who offered to help repair damaged systems. Others simply wanted to help however they could. The man in expensive clothes remained seated, alone, as everyone around him moved to their assigned positions. Far away, in the darkness of the Keldris Nebula, the Marrowclaw raiders were having problems of their own. Skarn, leader of the raider fleet, stood on the bridge of his flagship and stared at his sensor readings in confusion. The Marrowclaws were a rough species, scaled and sharp-toothed, built for fighting and taking what they wanted. They had attacked the Gentle Dawn expecting easy prey. The transport had been carrying refugees from a border conflict. Soft, scared people with no weapons and no defenders, perfect targets. But now something strange was happening. "What do you mean, ships are coming?" Skarn growled at his sensor operator. "Multiple vessels, Lord Skarn, 17 of them. They jumped to faster-than-light speed about 2 hours ago. They will be here soon." "Velari reinforcements." "No, Lord, the ship designs are different. We have never seen anything like them. Wait." The operator's scales went pale. "Lord Skarn, I am checking the database. These ships, they are human." Skarn went very still. Every species in the galaxy knew about humans. They were the nightmare that had crawled out of a Class 7 Deathworld and learned to build starships. They were strong enough to crush bones, fast enough to dodge attacks, stubborn enough to keep fighting long after any sensible creature would have surrendered. Their planet had tried to kill them every day for millions of years, and they had responded by conquering it. "Why would humans come here?" Skarn demanded. "This is Velari space. They hate humans." His second-in-command, a scarred female named Vix, answered carefully. "Perhaps they want the refugees for themselves. I have heard stories about what humans do to prisoners." Skarn considered this. Yes, that made sense. Deathworlders were predators after all. They probably saw the disabled transport as easy prey, just like the Marrowclaws had. "We need to work faster," he decided. "Strip the transport of everything valuable and be gone before the humans arrive. I do not want to fight Deathworlders." The raiders increased their efforts. They cut through airlocks and forced their way into cargo holds. They took food, medicine, spare parts, anything that could be sold. Some of them dragged prisoners toward their ships, planning to sell them as slaves in the darker corners of the galaxy. On the Gentle Dawn, the refugees huddled together in fear. They had heard the raiders talking about humans. They had seen the fear in their captors' eyes. And somehow that fear made them hope. An elderly Velari named Min held a group of children close to her. She was 400 cycles old, the oldest being on the transport. She had traveled 100 worlds and seen many strange things. "Stay calm," she whispered to the children. "Help is coming." A little girl named Nira looked up at her with huge, frightened eyes. "But Grandmother Min, I heard the raiders say humans are coming. Humans are monsters. That is what my teachers told me." Min was quiet for a moment. She thought about all the stories she had heard about Deathworlders. The strength, the violence, the savage world that had created them. But she also thought about something her own grandmother had told her long ago. Sometimes the greatest monsters are the ones who hurt the helpless, and sometimes the greatest heroes come from the strangest places. "Perhaps," Min said softly, "the monsters are already here. The raiders who attacked us, who took our food and our medicine, who want to sell us as slaves. Perhaps the Deathworlders are coming to chase the real monsters away." Nira did not look convinced, but she stayed quiet, pressing close to the old woman's side. Outside, the stars were silent and cold. But somewhere in that darkness, 17 ships were racing through space at impossible speeds. The Deathworlders were almost there. The Marrowclaw raiders never saw them coming. One moment, the space around the disabled transport was empty except for the raider ships. The next moment, the sky was full of human vessels dropping out of faster-than-light speed in perfect formation. Commander Do-yun stood on the bridge of the Hanul, his eyes fixed on the scene before him. The gentle dawn was dark and wounded, its hull covered with scorch marks from the raider attack. 3 Marrowclaw ships circled it like predators around dying prey. "All ships, this is Commander Do-yun," he said into the fleet-wide channel. "The transport is still intact. I see survivors moving inside. The raiders are still here. We engage immediately. Protect the transport at all costs." The human fleet split into attack groups with practiced speed. The Hanul and 2 other military vessels went straight for the largest raider ship. The Busan Star and the cargo haulers moved to form a protective wall around the transport. The medical frigate Mercy's hand hung back, waiting to receive wounded. Skarn, the Marrowclaw leader, stared at his sensor display in disbelief. The human ships were so much smaller than he had expected, so ordinary-looking. Where were the massive warships he had heard stories about? Where were the terrifying weapons of mass destruction? "They are just civilian ships," Vic said, her voice uncertain. "Cargo haulers and passenger liners. What kind of rescue fleet is this?" Skarn felt his confidence return. A weak one. They are soft creatures after all. All ships attack the human fleet. Show them what happens when prey tries to fight back. The Marrowclaw ships turned and fired. Their weapons were powerful, designed to punch through the hulls of merchant vessels. The plasma bolts streaked across space toward the approaching humans. And then something strange happened. The Hanul flew straight into the barrage. Plasma fire hammered against its shields again and again. Any Velari ship would have been crippled. Any Keldris vessel would have been destroyed. The Hanul kept coming. On the bridge, young Woojin gripped his weapon's console as the ship shook around him. Warning lights flashed. Alarms screamed. But the shields held. "How is this possible?" Skarn shouted on his bridge. "Our weapons should be tearing them apart." He did not understand. He could not understand. The Marrowclaws had never fought humans before. They did not know that human ships were built to survive the radiation storms of their own sun. They did not know that human engineers designed shields to handle forces that would crush most species. They did not know that humans came from a world where survival meant preparing for the worst always. The Hanul returned fire. The first shot punched through the raider flagship's shields like they were made of paper. The second shot hit their engine section, causing explosions that sent the ship spinning. The third shot was not necessary, because by then the Marrowclaws were already running. "All raider vessels retreat," Skarn screamed. "Retreat now." The battle lasted less than 10 minutes. The human fleet did not even take serious damage. One cargo hauler had a cracked viewport. The Busan Star lost a decorative antenna. That was all. But the real work was just beginning. Dr. Lee Hana was the first human to board the Gentle Dawn. She climbed through a damaged airlock with her medical bag in one hand and a scanner in the other. Behind her came a team of nurses and medics, including young Corporal Subin. The inside of the transport was dark and cold. The air smelled wrong, a mixture of smoke and fear and too many bodies in too small a space. Emergency lights cast red shadows on the walls. And everywhere there were survivors. They sat in groups, huddled together for warmth. Velari with their shimmering skin now dull and gray from cold. Keldris with their thick scales wrapped in blankets. Small furry beings from a species Hana did not recognize, their eyes huge with fear. And children of all kinds, clinging to adults who could barely protect themselves. For a moment, everyone froze. The refugees stared at the humans. The humans stared at the refugees. Then Hana stepped forward and smiled. It was a warm smile, the kind she used with frightened patients back on Earth. "Hello," she said, speaking slowly so the translation devices could work. "My name is Hana. I am a doctor. We are here to help you." An elderly Velari woman stood up. It was Min, the oldest survivor. Her voice was weak but clear. "You are human, the Deathworlders." "Yes," Hana said simply. We heard your call for help. We came as fast as we could. Min looked at her for a long moment. Then she began to laugh. It was a strange sound, half joy and half relief, and it spread through the group of survivors like a wave. The Deathworlders came to save us, someone said in amazement. I thought they would eat us, another voice whispered. They look so small, a child said. Teacher said they were giant monsters. Hana ignored the comments and got to work. She moved through the crowd, scanning each patient, identifying injuries and illnesses. Her team spread out behind her, setting up treatment stations. The work was harder than anything Hana had ever done. Every species needed different things. The Velari required warmer temperatures and higher oxygen levels. The Keldris needed the opposite, cool air and less light. Some of the children had not eaten in days. Others were injured from the raider attack. And then there were the psychological wounds, the terror of the attack, the horror of watching friends and family taken by slavers, the shame of being helpless. Corporal Subin found herself kneeling beside a small Velari girl who would not speak. The child just stared at her with huge blue eyes, trembling. Hello, Subin said softly. My name is Subin. What is your name? No answer. Subin reached into her pocket and pulled out a small object. It was a candy, wrapped in bright paper. She had brought a whole bag of them, thinking the children might like something sweet. She held it out to the little girl. The child stared at the candy like it might explode. Then, very slowly, she reached out and took it. Her small fingers touched Subin's hand, and she flinched at the warmth. Humans are so hot, the girl whispered. It was the first word she had spoken. Subin smiled. Yes, we are. Our world is very warm. What is your name? Nira. The girl unwrapped the candy and put it in her mouth. Her eyes went wide. This is sweet. Do you like it? Nira nodded slowly. I have more, Subin said. But first, can I check if you are hurt? I want to make sure you are okay. Nira looked at her for a long moment. Then she nodded again and held out her arm. As Subin examined the child, something strange happened. Nira did not pull away. Instead, she moved closer. The human's body heat was like a warm fire on a cold night. And despite everything she had been taught about Deathworlders, despite all the stories of monsters and savages, Nira felt safe. She grabbed Subin's hand and refused to let go. Across the transport, similar scenes played out. Human medics treated alien patients with gentle hands. Human engineers worked to restore life support. Human volunteers distributed food and water and blankets. Commander Doyan himself came aboard to coordinate the evacuation. He found Elder Min sitting among a group of children, telling them stories to keep them calm. Elder, he said respectfully, bowing in the Velari style. We are preparing to transfer everyone to our ships. The medical frigate has the best facilities for the wounded. The cruise liner has space for families. Is there anything specific your people need? Min looked up at him with ancient eyes. She had lived 400 cycles. She had met beings from 100 different worlds, but she had never met anyone quite like this human. Commander, she said, why did you come? Doyan seemed confused by the question. You called for help. Yes, but we are Velari. Our government has banned your kind from our space. They say humans are dangerous. They say you cannot be trusted. Doyan shrugged. With respect, Elder, I did not hear politicians calling for help. I heard people, families, children. That is what mattered. Min was silent for a moment. Then she smiled, a warm expression that transformed her tired face. Perhaps, she said, our politicians have made a mistake. The evacuation took several hours. The humans worked without rest, carrying wounded patients, guiding frightened families, making sure no one was left behind. By the time the gentle dawn was empty, every survivor had been transferred to the safety of a human ship. On the Mercy's hand, Dr. Hana finally allowed herself to sit down. Her hands were shaking from exhaustion, but she was smiling. They had done it. Against all odds, they had saved 400 people. Corporal Subin sat beside her, and in her lap, little Nera was fast asleep. The child was still holding her hand. "Doctor," Subin said quietly, "I think she has adopted me." Hana laughed. "Humans have that effect on people. We are hard to get rid of." Outside, the stars turned slowly in the endless darkness. But inside the human ships, there was warmth and light and hope. The Deathworlders had come to save the day. And the galaxy was watching. The Velari fleet arrived 3 days late and found nothing but an empty transport ship drifting in the darkness. Admiral Kali stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Silver Wind, and felt his stomach turn cold. For 3 days he had pushed his ships at maximum speed, hopping to reach the gentle dawn in time. For 3 days he had imagined the horrors the refugees must be suffering. Now he stared at sensor readings that made no sense. "The transport is empty," his sensor officer reported. "No life signs, no bodies, the raiders are gone," and the officer hesitated. "Speak," Kali's ordered. "There are human ships holding position nearby, Admiral. 17 of them. They appear to be waiting for us." Kali's gripped the railing in front of him until his knuckles went white. The humans. Of course it was the humans. They had entered Velari space without permission, attacked the raiders, and now they were sitting here like they owned the place. And the worst part was, they had the refugees. "Open a channel," Kali said, his voice tight with anger. The face that appeared on his screen was calm and patient. Commander Park Do-yeon looked tired but alert, a human with gray in his hair and steady eyes. "Admiral Kali," Do-yeon said, "I am glad you arrived. We have been waiting for you." "You have been waiting." Kali's could barely keep his voice level. "You invaded our territory. You violated every treaty between our peoples. You kidnapped 400 Velari citizens, and now you say you have been waiting." Do-yeon did not flinch. "Admiral, we responded to a distress call. Your people were dying. The raiders were taking prisoners. We did what we had to do." "You had no right." "Perhaps not, but those people are alive because we came. Would you prefer they were dead?" Kali's wanted to scream. He wanted to order his fleet to attack, to destroy these arrogant Deathworlders and reclaim the honor of his people. But he knew what would happen if he tried. He had seen the battle recordings from the raider encounter. Human ships were small, but they were tough. A fight would cost him dearly. And the galaxy was watching. News drones had followed the human fleet into Velari space. Every major information network was broadcasting live coverage of this moment. 1,000 worlds were waiting to see what would happen next. "Release the refugees immediately," Kali's demanded. "Transfer them to our medical ships." "We will be happy to transfer them," Do-yeon replied. "But some of the wounded require specific environmental conditions that your ships cannot provide. Our doctors have been keeping them alive with careful adjustments to gravity, temperature, and atmosphere. If we move them too quickly, they will die." Kali's hesitated. He did not want to believe the human, but he also knew that his own medical ships were not designed for multi-species care. The Velari had never needed such technology. They kept to themselves, treating only their own kind. "How long?" he asked grudgingly. "A few more hours. Our chief medical officer, Dr. Lihana, is preparing the patients for transfer now. She has requested that some of your medics come aboard to learn the treatment protocols. She wants to make sure the patients continue to receive proper care after they leave our ships." It was a reasonable request. Kali's hated that it was reasonable. "Very well," he said, "but I want to come aboard as well. I want to see these refugees for myself." Do-yeon nodded. "You are welcome, Admiral. I will send you docking instructions." The channel closed and Kali's turned to his second-in-command. "Prepare my shuttle and bring a full security detail. I do not trust these Deathworlders." When Admiral Kali's boarded the medical frigate Mercy's Hand, he expected to find chaos. He expected to find neglect and cruelty. He expected to find proof that humans were the monsters everyone said they were. Instead, he found his people being cared for with a gentleness that took his breath away. The ship was clean and bright. Every patient had their own bed with environmental controls adjusted to their specific needs. Human doctors and nurses moved between them, checking readings, adjusting treatments, offering comfort. A human medic was feeding soup to an elderly Velari man who could not hold the spoon himself. A human nurse was singing softly to a group of children while checking their injuries. A human engineer was explaining to a Keldris family how the life support system worked, making sure they understood they were safe. And everywhere Kali's looked, he saw something he had not expected: smiles. The refugees were smiling. Elder Min approached him, walking slowly with the help of a human support frame. "Admiral Kalis," she said, "I am glad you have finally arrived." Kalis bowed deeply. "Elder Min, I am sorry we could not reach you sooner. The distance was too great." "I know, but it does not matter now. The humans came, they saved us. They had no right to enter our space." Min looked at him with ancient, knowing eyes. "Admiral, when I was dying of cold and fear, when raiders were dragging my neighbors away in chains, I did not care about territorial boundaries. I only cared that someone, anyone, would come to help. And someone did." She gestured around the medical bay. "Look at them, Admiral. Look at what the Deathworlders have done. They crossed the galaxy to save strangers. They fought off raiders without hesitation. They treated our wounds and fed our children and kept us warm. Is this what monsters do?" Kalis could not answer. A small sound drew his attention. He looked down and saw a little girl clinging to the leg of a human woman. The girl was Velari, no more than 5 cycles old, with huge blue eyes that watched Kalis nervously. "Nira," the human woman said gently, "this is Admiral Kalis. He came to take you home." The girl, Nira, looked at the Admiral with suspicion. Then she looked back at the human. "I do not want to go. I want to stay with you, Subin." Kalis felt something twist in his chest. This child, who had been taught her whole life that humans were dangerous, was clinging to one for safety. She trusted this Deathworlder more than she trusted her own people. Corporal Subin knelt down to the child's level. "Nira, your family is waiting for you. Your home is waiting. This is where you belong." "But what about you?" Subin smiled and Kali saw tears in her eyes. "I will remember you, little one. And maybe someday when things are different, we will see each other again." Nira threw her arms around the human's neck. "Promise." "I promise." Admiral Kalis watched this scene and felt his certainty crumbling. He had spent his whole career believing that humans were a threat to be contained. He had supported every treaty that kept them at arm's length. He had argued against any attempt to improve relations. But now, watching a human woman cry over a child who was not her own, watching his people smile and laugh among their supposed enemies, he began to wonder if he had been wrong. He found Commander Doyun on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. "Commander," Kali said, his voice softer than before, "I have a question." Doyun turned to face him. "Yes, Admiral." "Why did you come? You knew our people despise humans. You knew we might attack you. You knew that saving our refugees would not change how we see your kind. So why? Why risk everything for strangers who hate you?" Doyun was quiet for a long moment. He looked out at the stars, at the vast darkness that separated worlds. "Admiral, where I come from, the universe tried to kill us every single day. The weather would turn deadly without warning. Animals hunted us. Diseases swept through our cities. We survived because we learned to help each other. When someone was in trouble, you did not stop to ask if they deserved help. You just helped them." He turned to face Kalis directly. "Those refugees were not Velari to me. They were not aliens or strangers or enemies. They were people who needed help. That is all that mattered." Kalis shook his head slowly. I do not understand your species. I do not think I ever will. You do not have to understand us, Do-young said. You just have to see us for what we are. Not monsters, not threats, just people trying to do the right thing. Before Collies could respond, his communication device buzzed. A message was coming through on a priority channel. It was from Elder Min. Admiral Collies, the message said, I have spoken with the other survivors. We have decided to make a joint statement to the galactic news networks. We want to tell everyone what really happened here. We want them to know that the Deathworlders saved us when no one else could. Collies closed his eyes. The political implications were enormous. This statement would change everything. It would challenge centuries of fear and prejudice. It would force the Velari to reconsider everything they thought they knew about humans. And he could not stop it. The survivors had the right to tell their story, and their story was this: the monsters had turned out to be heroes. On 1,000 worlds, the broadcasts were beginning. The galaxy was finally ready to listen. The broadcast reached every corner of the galaxy within hours. Elder Min stood before the cameras with dozens of survivors behind her. Children sat with human medics who had cared for them. Wounded passengers lay in beds surrounded by both human and Velari doctors. And little Nira stood at the front, still holding Corporal Subin's hand. My name is Min, the elder said, her voice strong despite her age. I am 400 cycles old. I have traveled 100 worlds and met beings of every kind. Today, I want to tell you about the strangest beings I have ever encountered. She paused, letting the anticipation build. I want to tell you about humans. Across the galaxy, billions of beings leaned closer to their screens. We were taught that Deathworlders are monsters, Min continued. We were told they are violent, dangerous, and unable to feel compassion. Our children learned to fear them before they learned to walk. But I have seen the truth now, and I can no longer stay silent. She gestured to the humans standing among the survivors. These people crossed the galaxy to save us. They did not ask permission. They did not calculate the political cost. They simply heard that strangers were dying and they came to help. When they arrived, they fought off raiders who had taken our friends as slaves. Then they treated our wounded, fed our hungry, and held our children while they cried. Her voice cracked with emotion. Is this what monsters do? Do monsters sing lullabies to frighten children? Do monsters weep when they cannot save a patient? Do monsters risk war to rescue strangers who have spent generations hatting them? She shook her head. No, these are not monsters. These are the kindest, bravest, most stubborn people I have ever known, and I think we owe them an apology. The broadcast continued with more survivors sharing their stories. A Keldris father described how a human engineer had worked for hours to repair a heating system that was keeping his sick daughter alive. A young Velari man explained how a human doctor had operated on him with hands so steady they seemed to belong to a machine. A child said simply, "The humans gave me candy and told me I was safe. I believed them." When little Nira's turn came, she looked up at the camera with her huge blue eyes. My teacher said humans eat children, she said, but Subin gave me candy and hugs, and she kept me warm when I was cold. She squeezed the corporal's hand. I do not think humans are bad. I think they are good. I think we should be friends. The broadcast ended, but its effects had only begun. On the Velari homeworld, the High Council met in emergency session. Ambassador Torin argued that the broadcast was human propaganda, an attempt to manipulate public opinion. But for once, no one was listening to him. Ordinary Velari citizens were flooding communication channels with questions. If humans were really so dangerous, why had they helped the refugees? If they were incapable of compassion, why had Velari children clung to them for comfort? If they could not be trusted, why had they waited patiently for the Velari fleet instead of fleeing with their so-called prisoners? The old stories did not make sense anymore. In the neutral zone between Velari and human space, Admiral Kali's requested a private meeting with Commander Do-yun. The two commanders faced each other in Do-yun's ready room, the small space feeling even smaller with the weight of what they needed to discuss. Kali's looked at the human for a long moment. Do-yun was shorter than him, more compact, built from the heavy gravity of his savage world. His face was calm, patient, waiting. "I have a confession," Kali said at last. "When I arrived at the rescue site, I was ready to destroy your fleet. I believed you had taken our people to use them as hostages or worse. I believed every terrible thing I had ever heard about Deathworlders." Do-yun nodded slowly. "And now?" "Now I do not know what to believe." Kali sat down heavily, his tall frame folding into a chair designed for humans. "I have spent my whole life certain that your kind was a threat, but what I saw on your ships, that was not the behavior of monsters. That was kindness, real kindness offered to people who had given you nothing but hatred." "We do not help people because we expect something in return," Do-yun said. "We help because it is right." "But why?" Kali's leaned forward, genuinely confused. "Why is it right? Where does this instinct come from?" Do-yun thought about the question for a moment. Then he stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the stars. "Our world tried to kill us," he said quietly. "Every day for millions of years, the ground shook, the sky sent fire, the water poisoned itself, and everywhere things with teeth and claws hunted us." He turned back to Kali's. "We were weak. We had no fangs, no armor, no venom. Alone, any human was just prey, but together," he smiled. "Together, we were something different. We learned that the only way to survive was to care for each other. When someone fell, we picked them up. When someone was hungry, we shared our food. When someone cried out for help, we answered." He sat down across from Kali's. "That instinct is written into our very bones, Admiral. We cannot turn it off. When we hear someone in pain, something inside us demands that we help. It does not matter who they are or where they come from. It does not matter if they hate us or fear us. They need help and we can give it. That is enough." Kali's was silent for a long time. Finally, he did something no Velari had ever done to a human. He stood, placed his hand over his heart, and bowed deeply. "Perhaps," he said, "we have much to learn from the Deathworlders." The days that followed brought changes no one had expected. The Velari High Council, pressured by public opinion and the testimony of the survivors, agreed to begin formal negotiations with Earth. Not as enemies keeping watch on each other, but as potential allies exploring common ground. Director Han Minji, Earth's diplomatic representative, received the news with cautious optimism. She had spent 30 years trying to convince the galaxy that humans belonged among the stars. This was not victory, she knew. There would still be fear and suspicion, and those who refused to see past old stories. But it was a beginning. Captain Jiwin returned to his cruise route, but he found that his passengers had changed. They no longer wanted to see pretty nebulae and alien ruins. They wanted to hear about the rescue. They wanted to know what it felt like to ram a raider ship with a luxury liner. They wanted to understand what it meant to be human. Dr. Lee Hanna was offered a position with a new galactic medical exchange program. For the first time, human doctors would work alongside alien healers, sharing knowledge and techniques. She accepted immediately. And Corporal Subin received a letter from a Velari school, forwarded through official channels. Little Nira had drawn her a picture, a tall human figure holding hands with a small Velari child, surrounded by stars. At the bottom, in careful letters, were the words, "Friends forever." Subin hung the picture in her quarters and smiled every time she looked at it. Commander Park Do-yun returned to Earth. He was offered medals and promotions, but he turned them down. He did not want glory. He had done what any human would do, what any human should do when they heard someone calling for help. His daughter met him at the spaceport. She was 10 years old, born on a space station, a child of the stars. She ran into his arms and asked the question that all children ask their fathers. Daddy, are you a hero? Doyun laughed and picked her up, holding her close. No, sweetheart, I am just human. She thought about this for a moment, then she smiled. I think that is even better. Doyun carried her toward home, leaving the spaceport behind. Around them, people of all kinds went about their business. Humans hurrying to catch flights, aliens visiting Earth for the first time, children running and laughing in languages from a dozen different worlds. It was not a perfect galaxy. There was still fear and conflict and misunderstanding. There were still those who believed Deathworlders were monsters. There were still battles to be fought and bridges to be built. But somewhere in the darkness between stars, a signal had gone out. An SOS crying for help, and the humans had answered. That was what mattered. That was what would always matter. Because on a small blue planet circling an ordinary yellow sun, a species had learned the most important lesson in the universe. That kindness was not weakness. That compassion was not stupidity. That helping strangers was not a burden but a gift. The Deathworlders had stirred from their savage world and reached out their hands to a galaxy that feared them. And one by one, slowly but surely, the galaxy was reaching back.